Imagine a nation literally tearing itself in two, a country at war with itself. And right in the middle of that storm, there's this one man, a tall, almost unlikely figure, tasked with an absolutely impossible mission: to stop a republic from destroying itself. This is the story of Abraham Lincoln and how he navigated America through its darkest hour.
To really get a sense of the weight on his shoulders, you have to start with a number: 50,000. That's how many men were killed, wounded, or went missing in just 3 days at one single battle, Gettysburg. I mean, think about that. This wasn't some far-off war. This was a wound, a gaping wound on the soul of the country, and it shows you just how high the stakes really were.
By 1863, the United States was, to use Lincoln's own famous words, a house divided. The war, which had ignited over the institution of slavery, had split the country right down the middle. The whole idea of one single unified nation, well, it was on the verge of completely falling apart. And it was Lincoln's job to somehow hold it all together.
So yeah, the nation was at its breaking point. This Civil War was so much more than just a conflict with armies and battles. It was the ultimate stress test of America's founding ideas. Could a nation that was born out of a desire for liberty, one that was dedicated to the idea that all men are created equal, could it actually survive?
With the country still reeling from the absolute carnage at Gettysburg, Lincoln traveled to that very same battlefield. And there, he pulled out his first great tool for saving the nation: his words. He was about to give a speech that would completely reframe the entire meaning of the war.
The power in this is just incredible. The entire Gettysburg Address is less than 300 words long. You could read it in about 2 minutes. But with this one closing line, Lincoln connects the sacrifice of those soldiers to something so much bigger. He's saying this isn't just about winning a battle. It's about the survival of democracy itself, everywhere.
But here's the thing. Lincoln's genius wasn't just in what he was saying, but in how he said it. He was a master of language, and one of his go-to techniques was this thing called antithesis. It's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. You put two opposite ideas right next to each other to make a really powerful point.
And look at how he uses it here. It's just brilliant. He takes the ultimate contrast, death and life, and puts them in the same breath. The message becomes crystal clear. The soldier's sacrifice wasn't an end. No, it was the very thing that would give the nation a new birth of freedom. He's crafting a message of hope right out of the middle of a tragedy.
So you see, Lincoln was using every tool in his rhetorical arsenal. He'd allude to the Declaration of Independence to remind people what they were fighting for. He'd repeat words like "we" and "dedicate" to make everyone feel like they were in it together. And he used those powerful contrasts to turn sacrifice into a story of national rebirth.
Okay, but powerful words are one thing. Saving the Union required more than a great speech. It required armies and guns and food and a totally revolutionary economic plan to pay for it all. And this is where we see Lincoln the pragmatist, the problem solver, really get to work.
I mean, here was the massive problem the Union was facing. This war was unbelievably expensive, and the old way of funding a government with money backed by gold, it just wasn't going to cut it. So now you have an economic crisis sitting on top of a military one. Lincoln needed a big, bold idea, fast.
And that idea was the greenback. Honestly, this was a radical move. For the first time, the U.S. government issued paper money that wasn't backed by a pile of gold in a vault somewhere. It was backed by something much more abstract, a promise. The full faith and credit of the United States. It was a huge gamble on the future of the Union itself.
But this wasn't just about printing money. Lincoln's administration was smart. They paired the greenbacks with the creation of a whole new national banking system. This two-part plan not only stabilized the Northern economy, but it gave them the financial power they needed to win the war. In fact, it did more than that. It fundamentally changed America's whole financial system, paving the way for the modern economy.
So the Union armies are victorious, the economy is holding strong, and the war finally comes to an end. The nation is preserved. But just as everyone starts to breathe a sigh of relief, a new threat emerges from the shadows, a desperate, violent plot aimed right at the heart of the government.
These are the actual words of John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and a fierce Confederate sympathizer. He wrote them in his diary on the very day he assassinated the president. You can just feel the desperation. The Confederate cause was lost, and Booth felt that only some decisive and great act of violence could throw the Union into chaos and maybe, just maybe, revive their cause.
This wasn't just one lone gunman.
The plot was a coordinated attack designed to take out the top 3 people in the Union government all in one night. While Booth was at Ford's Theater, another conspirator, Lewis Powell, was brutally attacking the Secretary of State, William Seward, in his own home. And a third man was supposed to kill the Vice President, Andrew Johnson, but he lost his nerve and bailed. They carried Lincoln's body from the theater across the street to a small boarding house. He lingered through the night, but the wound was just too severe. At 7:22 the next morning, the man who had fought so hard and sacrificed so much to save the nation was gone.
Lincoln's death was, of course, a horrific tragedy, but in a strange way, it was also the beginning of his transformation into something more than a man, into a national martyr. The final act of his life would shape his legacy just as much as any of his speeches or policies.
These famous words were spoken by the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, right at Lincoln's deathbed. And with that one sentence, he perfectly captured the feeling in that room. This wasn't just the death of a president. This was a moment that would echo through history forever. And that shock, that grief, it wasn't just felt in America. It rippled across the entire world. Leaders everywhere, from Great Britain to China, mourned his death as a global tragedy. And in nations like Haiti and Liberia, he was seen as more than just a president. To them, he was a hero, a father to millions, a symbol of freedom for the entire world.
And here's the ultimate tragic irony of Booth's whole conspiracy. He wanted to shatter the Union, right? Well, Lincoln's assassination did the exact opposite. His death basically made the cause he fought for sacred. He became a martyr for unity. And in that sacrifice, the nation found a new, powerful reason to stay together.
So in the end, Lincoln's story leaves us with this powerful question to think about. Through his leadership, his words, and ultimately his own life, he guided America through its absolute worst trial. His sacrifice didn't just end a war, it helped create a new national identity. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can the loss of a great leader, paradoxically, be the very thing that makes sure their vision lives on?